A spoiled teen mocked a black judge in court, but when he saw the kids at the community center weeks later, his hands started trembling. The truth about his own life made everyone gasp. Michael Edwards tapped his Mont Blanc pen against the polished mahogany desk, ignoring Mrs. Bennett's lecture about Civil War economics. The classroom's wall-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Central Park, but even that couldn't hold his attention. His Apple Watch vibrated, another message from his father's lawyer. "Mr. Edwards, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on the economic impact of the Emancipation Proclamation?" Mrs. Bennett's voice cut through his disinterest. Michael looked up, his blue blazer perfectly pressed against the leather chair. "I think it's pretty simple. Some people had money, others didn't. Not much has changed." He smirked as scattered laughter rippled through the classroom. Mrs. Bennett's lips tightened. "That's hardly an adequate analysis of Dash. My father says the real history lesson is that there will always be winners and losers. That's just how the world works." Michael's voice carried the practiced confidence of someone who'd never been told no. The bell rang before Mrs. Bennett could respond. Michael grabbed his leather backpack and headed for the door, but her voice stopped him. "Michael, a moment, please." He turned, watching his classmates file out. "I have lunch plans. Your recent test scores and participation have been concerning." She held up his latest paper, marked with a bright red D. "This isn't like your previous work. I've been busy. Family stuff." He shifted his weight, glancing at his watch. "If you're struggling with the material, Dash, I'm not struggling with anything." Michael's jaw tightened. "My father makes annual donations that could fund this entire department. Maybe focus on the students who actually need help." He walked out, leaving Mrs. Bennett standing there with his failed paper. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. His father's latest deposit had cleared, another $5,000 for school expenses. The cafeteria buzzed with activity. Michael spotted Jeremy Chun at their usual table, hunched over a textbook. Still studying for Thompson's case? Michael dropped into the leather seat, pulling out his wallet. Jeremy looked up, dark circles under his eyes. "Some of us can't afford to fail another class." "Sounds rough." Michael pulled out several $100 bills. "Hey, I need the physics lab answers for next week." "Standard rate?" Jeremy stared at the money. "I don't know, Michael. After last time, Dash. Double it then." Michael added more bills to the stack. "Come on, your scholarship doesn't cover everything, does it?" Jeremy's hands shook slightly as he reached for the cash. "Fine, but this is the last time." "Sure it is." Michael grinned, then turned to wave over another student. "Hey, Marcus, need help with that history paper?" By the end of lunch, Michael had helped 3 more classmates with their academic struggles. His wallet was lighter, but his phone was full of forwarded assignments and test answers. The system worked it always had. The afternoon dragged until final bell. Michael's driver, James, waited in the usual spot in his father's spare Mercedes. "Good day, Mr. Edwards?" "Whatever." "Home?" Michael slumped in the back seat, scrolling through Instagram. The car merged into Manhattan traffic, and he tried to ignore the growing knot in his stomach. His father should have called by now about the court hearing. The elevator opened directly into their penthouse's marble foyer. Michael heard voices from his father's study, angry, urgent voices. "They can't just freeze everything." His father's voice cracked. "I have rights." "Lower your voice, Richard." His mother's sharp tone. "The staff will hear." Michael crept closer to the partially open door. "Thompson's out to get me. He's had it in for successful white businessmen for years. You've seen how he handles these cases. The evidence they presented, Dash, is circumstantial. A few accounting irregularities, some missing paperwork. Nothing illegal. The IRS seems to disagree." His mother's heels clicked against the hardwood. "What about Michael? Have you thought about what happens to him if Dash? Nothing's going to happen." Something crashed, probably another crystal tumbler. His father had been drinking more lately. "I built this empire from nothing. Some affirmative action, Judge, isn't going to tear it down." Michael's phone buzzed, another news alert about his father's case. He opened it, scanning the article. Judge Marcus Thompson, 30 years on the bench, known for his tough stance on white-collar crime. The photo showed a stern-faced black man in judicial robes. His father's words echoed. "Some affirmative action, Judge." Michael retreated to his room, closing the door on his parents' argument. He opened his laptop, searching for more information about Judge Thompson. Each article made his anger grow. This man, this judge, threatened everything his family had built. The intercom buzzed. "Dinner is served, Mr. Edwards." Michael ignored it, reading another article about Thompson's humble beginnings, his scholarship to law school, his commitment to equal justice. Equal justice? Michael snorted. Right? He spent the next hour diving deeper into Thompson's case history. The pattern was clear, or at least it seemed clear to Michael's biased perspective. Wealthy white defendants, harsh sentences. This wasn't justice. This was revenge. When he finally went down to dinner, the massive dining table was mostly empty. His mother picked at her salad while his father stared at his phone, ignoring the untouched steak in front of him. How was school? His mother's attempt at normalcy fell flat. Fine. Michael pushed his food around. Dad, about the hearing tomorrow, it's handled. His father didn't look up. Everything's under control. But I saw the news, I said it's handled. His father's fist hit the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. This Thompson thinks he can push us around, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. No one does. Michael nodded, but his appetite was gone. He excused himself and returned to his room, lying awake in his king-sized bed. The city lights sparkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but they offered no comfort. Tomorrow was another hearing. His father had promised everything was fine, but Michael had never seen him so scared. The great Richard Edwards, master of Manhattan real estate, brought low by some judge from the Bronx. Michael opened his phone again, staring at Thompson's photo. The man's stern expression seemed to mock him. Well, two could play at that game. If Thompson wanted to destroy his family, Michael would make sure he regretted it. Sleep didn't come easily that night. In the darkness of his room, Michael plotted and planned, his privilege and prejudice feeding into a growing storm of resentment. Tomorrow would change everything, but not in the way he imagined. The last thing he saw before finally drifting off was Judge Thompson's face on his phone screen, a reminder of the confrontation to come. In his dreams, the judge's gavel became a weapon, threatening to shatter the only world Michael had ever known. He didn't realize that the real threat to his world wasn't Judge Thompson at all. It was the person Michael had become. The morning sun hit the kitchen's marble countertops as Michael watched his father adjust his Hermes tie for the 5th time. Richard Edwards' hands trembled slightly, something Michael had never seen before. "Your mother will pick you up from school," his father said, not meeting his eyes. "I might be late tonight. I'm coming with you." Michael stood up from his barely touched breakfast. "Absolutely not. You have school? Like anyone's actually learning anything today." Michael pulled out his phone, showing a social media post about the hearing. "Half the class is talking about it anyway. I'm not sitting there while they gossip about our family." His father's face hardened. "This isn't up for discussion. Dad." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Please." Richard Edwards stared at his son for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, but you stay quiet. Not a word in that courtroom, understand?" Michael nodded, already texting James to bring the car around. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the courthouse. Reporters swarmed the entrance, cameras flashing. "Mr. Edwards, any comment on the fraud allegations? What do you say to claims of systematic tax evasion? Is it true you hid millions in offshore accounts?" James cleared a path while Michael's father kept his head high, ignoring the questions. Michael followed, his heart pounding. Inside, their lawyer waited. Harrison Wells, silver-haired and expensive in his tailored suit. "Richard." Wells nodded tersely. "Didn't expect to see Michael here." He insisted. Richard straightened his tie again. "What's our strategy?" "Same as discussed. Wells stopped as bailiffs opened the courtroom doors. "It's time." Michael had never been in a courtroom before. The wood panels and high ceiling reminded him of his school's chapel, but there was nothing sacred about this place. His father and Wells took their places at the defense table while Michael sat directly behind them. Then Judge Thompson entered, and Michael's stomach clenched. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Marcus Thompson presiding. Thompson moved with deliberate authority, his robes flowing as he took his seat. His expression revealed nothing as he surveyed the courtroom. "Be seated." His voice was deep, controlled. We're here to continue the matter of United States v. Edwards. Mr. Wells, is your client prepared to address the new evidence presented by the prosecution? Yes, Your Honor. Wells stood. However, we contest the admissibility of several key documents. Michael barely followed the legal arguments. He watched Judge Thompson's face, searching for signs of the bias his father had mentioned. The judge asked pointed questions, his tone neutral but probing. The prosecution presented financial records, spreadsheets, bank statements, emails. With each new piece of evidence, Michael's father seemed to shrink slightly in his chair. Mr. Edwards, Thompson's voice cut through the technical discussion. Would you care to explain these discrepancies in your 2022 tax returns? Richard Edwards stood, adjusting his jacket. Your Honor, these apparent discrepancies are simply the result of complex but perfectly legal tax strategies. My accountants dash. Your accountants are also under investigation. Thompson held up a document. Let's discuss the transfer of funds to the Cayman Islands account ending in 4891. That account was established for legitimate business purposes, including the purchase of 3 yachts registered under shell companies. Michael's father faltered. Those vessels were business assets? Business assets. Thompson's tone remained level, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Used exclusively for client entertainment, I assume? Primarily, yes. And the wire transfers to accounts in Switzerland and Luxembourg. International business requires international banking relationships. Indeed, Thompson picked up another document. Like the relationship with Golden Circle Investments, a company that seems to exist only on paper, Michael watched his father's composure crack further. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Your Honor, these are complicated financial matters dash. Oh, I find them quite simple, Mr. Edwards. Thompson leaned forward. A clear pattern of deliberate tax evasion and fraud. The only complicated part is untangling the web of lies you've woven. Objection. Wells stood. Your Honor is editorializing. Sustained. Thompson nodded. I'll rephrase. Mr. Edwards, the evidence suggests systematic financial misconduct. Do you deny transferring these funds to avoid tax obligations? Richard Edwards glanced back at Michael, then at his lawyer. I acted within the scope of aggressive but legal tax strategies. Aggressive? Thompson set down his papers. That's one word for it. Michael's hands clenched into fists. The judge's tone is subtle expressions. Everything screamed contempt for his father. The hearing continued, each new revelation hitting harder than the last. Michael watched his father, the great Richard Edwards, struggle to explain away damning evidence. The man who had taught him that money solved everything now seemed small, desperate. During a brief recess, Michael followed his father and Wells to a private conference room. This is a disaster. Wells paced. Thompson's not buying any of our explanations. He's biased. Richard loosened his tie. You saw how he looked at me. He's enjoying this. He's doing his job. Wells checked his phone. The prosecution's case is stronger than we anticipated. Those offshore accounts dash were perfectly legal. The timing of the transfers suggests otherwise. Wells sighed. Richard, we need to consider a plea deal. Absolutely not. Richard slammed his hand on the table. I won't let some affirmative action appointee destroy everything I've built. Michael stepped closer. Dad dash, not now, Michael. His father rubbed his temples. I need to think. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution presented their final evidence. Emails showing Richard Edwards had personally directed the creation of shell companies to hide assets. Mr. Edwards, Thompson's voice carried a weight of finality. These communications appear to show premeditation in concealing taxable income. Would you care to explain? Richard stood slowly. Your Honor, these emails lack context. In the broader scope of our business operations dash, the context seems quite clear. Thompson held up a printed email. Quote, make sure these transfers can't be traced. The last thing we need is the IRS asking questions. End quote. What context would justify such instructions? Michael watched his father struggle for words. The great man who had taught him that rules were for other people now looked trapped, cornered. Your Honor dash, Wells started. I'm addressing your client, Mr. Wells. Thompson's gaze remained fixed on Richard. "Well, Mr. Edwards?" The silence stretched. Michael's chest tightened. He wanted to scream, to defend his father, to wipe that look of calculated judgment off Thompson's face. Richard Edwards straightened his shoulders. "I was protecting my family's interests. By committing tax fraud, by utilizing available financial strategies. Strategies that coincidentally hid millions from the IRS. Thompson shook his head. "Mr. Edwards, this court has seen countless examples of wealthy individuals who believe laws are mere suggestions. Your strategies are nothing more than elaborate theft from the American people." Michael felt something snap inside him. The room's tension, his father's humiliation, Thompson's righteous tone, it all crashed together. "That's not fair." The words burst out before he could stop them. "Michael!" His father turned, face pale. Thompson's gaze shifted to Michael. "Young man, this is a courtroom, not a schoolyard. Another outburst will result in your removal." Michael started to respond, but Wells grabbed his arm, squeezing hard. The warning was clear, but the damage was done. Thompson had noticed him now, really noticed him. "Given the hour," Thompson announced, "we'll recess until tomorrow morning. Mr. Edwards, I suggest you use this time to carefully consider your position." His eyes flickered to Michael. "And to explain to your son the importance of courtroom decorum." The gavel struck, and Michael felt its impact in his bones. As people filed out, he caught Thompson watching him, not with anger, but with something worse. Pity. That night, lying in his bed, Michael replayed the scene over and over. His father's defeated posture. Wells' frustrated sighs. Thompson's calculated dissection of their defenses. Tomorrow would be worse. He knew it, felt it in his gut, but he wouldn't sit quietly this time. If Thompson wanted to destroy his family, he learned that the Edwards didn't go down without a fight. Michael touched his phone screen, bringing up Thompson's photo again. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he whispered, echoing his father's words from the night before. But in the darkness of his room, another voice whispered back, "Maybe you're the one who doesn't know." The morning sun hit the courthouse steps like a spotlight. Michael's shoes squeaked against the polished floor as he followed his father and Wells through security. His stomach churned with a mixture of anger and anxiety. "Remember," Wells muttered, checking his watch, "not a word from either of you unless directly addressed by the judge." Richard Edwards nodded, his usual confidence replaced by a slight tremor in his hands. Michael noticed his father had chosen his most expensive suit today. Brioni, dark blue, custom-tailored. Armor for the battle ahead. The courtroom was already packed. Michael recognized financial reporters from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, their fingers hovering over laptop keyboards. A few of his father's business associates sat scattered throughout, their faces carefully neutral. "All rise." Judge Thompson entered, his robes settling around him as he took his seat. Michael's jaw clenched at the sight of him. "Be seated." Thompson shuffled some papers. "We'll continue with the United States v. Edwards. Mr. Wells, is your client prepared to address yesterday's evidence?" Wells stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We've prepared a detailed explanation of the questioned transactions." "Proceed." Michael watched as Wells launched into a complex defense of his father's financial dealings. The lawyer's words blurred together. Tax codes, business expenses, legitimate deductions. But Michael focused on Thompson's face, searching for reactions. The judge's expression remained neutral, but his questions cut through Wells' arguments like a knife. "So these charitable donations to the Golden Circle Foundation, the same foundation where your client served as board chairman, were purely philanthropic?" "Absolutely, Your Honor. Mr. Edwards has a long history of charitable giving, a history that coincidentally provided significant tax benefits through an organization he controlled." Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Continue." The prosecution presented their next witness, Sarah Chun, a former accountant at Edwards Enterprises. Michael recognized her name from company picnics, holiday parties. She wouldn't meet his father's eyes as she took the stand. "Ms. Chun," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the instructions you received regarding the offshore accounts?" She cleared her throat. Mr. Edwards was very specific. "We were to structure the transfers to avoid reporting requirements, Did he explain why? He said. She glanced at Richard Edwards. He said the government had no right to his money, that he'd earned it, and he'd decide what to do with it. Michael's father shifted in his chair. Wells scribbled furiously on his legal pad. Did Mr. Edwards ever express concern about these practices? Only about getting caught. Her voice grew stronger. He said judges and regulators were just jealous of successful people. That they... She hesitated. Continue, Ms. Chun. Thompson's voice was firm. He said they were probably all affirmative action hires who'd never earned anything themselves. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Michael saw Thompson's fingers tighten slightly on his gavel, but his expression didn't change. And these offshore transfers, approximately how much money are we discussing? Over the past 5 years? She consulted her notes. Roughly $150 million. Another murmur, louder this time. Michael's father had gone pale. Order. Thompson's gavel cracked once. Mr. Wells, your cross-examination? Wells stood, but Michael barely heard the questions. His mind raced with calculations. $150 million. More money than he could imagine, hidden away in secret accounts. All those lectures about hard work and earning his place. While his father cheated the system he claimed to respect. The morning dragged on. More witnesses, more evidence. Each revelation seemed to chip away at his father's carefully constructed image. The great Richard Edwards exposed as just another wealthy criminal. During the lunch recess, Michael followed his father and Wells to their conference room. A half-eaten sandwich sat untouched on the table while Wells paced. This is worse than we thought. Wells loosened his tie. Chen's testimony. She's lying. Richard slammed his fist down. That ungrateful little dash. She has documentation. Wells cut him off. And Thompson clearly believes her. Of course he does. Richard's voice dripped with bitterness. He's been out to get me from the start. People like him always want to tear down success. Dad, Michael started, but his father waved him off. Not now, Michael. I need to think. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution presented their final witness, a forensic accountant who methodically detailed years of systematic tax evasion. His PowerPoint slide showed a web of shell companies, hidden transfers, and falsified records. In conclusion, the accountant pointed to his final slide. Mr. Edwards' actions demonstrate a clear pattern of intentional fraud designed to evade millions in tax obligations. Thompson nodded. Thank you. Mr. Wells? Wells's cross-examination felt weak, desperate. The accountant calmly deflected every attempt to discredit his findings. Mr. Edwards, Thompson's voice cut through the tension. Before we conclude today, would you like to address these allegations? Richard Edwards stood slowly. Michael saw a bead of sweat roll down his neck. Your Honor, He cleared his throat. These transactions were complex, but legal. I've created thousands of jobs, contributed millions to charity. That's not what I asked. Thompson's tone hardened slightly. Did you intentionally hide assets to evade taxes? I acted on advice from financial experts. A simple yes or no, Mr. Edwards. The silence stretched. Michael felt his pulse pounding in his ears. His father's voice cracked. I did what any successful businessman would do. So yes. Thompson's words fell like stones. You deliberately defrauded the government. Your Honor. Wells started. No. Michael jumped to his feet. You don't understand. Young man. Thompson's warning tone cut through the air. Sit down. But something had snapped inside Michael. All the pressure, the humiliation, the growing realization that his perfect world was built on lies. It erupted. You're just jealous. The words exploded out of him. You've probably never earned anything yourself. Just another affirmative action judge trying to tear down successful white men. The courtroom froze. His father's face went ash-white. Wells dropped his head into his hands. Thompson's expression didn't change, but his eyes locked onto Michael's with an intensity that made the boy's knees weak. Are you finished? The judge's voice was deadly quiet. Michael's anger warred with rising panic. You think you're better than us, but you're not. You're just bailiff. Thompson's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Remove this young man. No. Michael struggled as the bailiff approached. You can't do this. You're destroying my family. Michael, stop! His father's voice cracked with desperation. But Michael couldn't stop. Words poured out of him. Ugly words, racist words, each one digging his hole deeper. The bailiff grabbed his arm. Wait! Thompson's command froze everyone. He studied Michael for a long moment. Young man, your outburst has demonstrated something far more concerning than your father's financial crimes. Michael glared back, breathing hard. You believe your privilege places you above the law, above basic human decency. Thompson's words cut deep. That stops today. 500 hours of community service at the Bronx Community Center. Perhaps some time working with those you seem to despise will teach you what your parents clearly haven't. You can't dash. I can and I have. One more word, and I'll make it 1,000 hours. Thompson's gaze shifted to Richard Edwards. You'll ensure your son complies, or I'll consider it a violation of your own pending sentence. Michael's father nodded numbly. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell one final time. As the bailiff let him out, Michael caught a last glimpse of Judge Thompson. The man's expression wasn't angry or triumphant. It was something worse, disappointment, as if Michael had confirmed every negative assumption about privileged white kids from Manhattan. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Camera flashes popped like lightning. Michael heard his father's lawyer trying to handle damage control, but the words seemed far away. 500 hours. In the Bronx. With those people. His perfect world hadn't just cracked, it had shattered completely. And somewhere deep inside, past the anger and fear, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, he deserved it. The subway car rattled and screeched. Michael stood gripping a pole, his designer shoes shifting to maintain balance. He'd never taken the subway before. James had always driven him everywhere. But his father's assets were frozen, the driver laid off, and his mother had insisted he take public transportation to his community service. It's part of your punishment, she'd said that morning, handing him a Metro card. Learn from it. A man in stained work clothes brushed against Michael's Burberry coat. Michael flinched, then caught his own reflection in the window, pale, uncomfortable, obviously out of place. The automated voice crackled. Next stop, Morrison Avenue Soundview. Michael checked his phone's map again. 3 blocks to the Bronx Community Center. His stomach churned as the train lurched to a stop. The station was nothing like the pristine platforms near his penthouse. Grime coated the tiles. The air smelled of urine and stale cigarettes. Michael took the stairs 2 at a time, emerging into a neighborhood that looked like another planet. No doormen, no luxury storefronts, just rundown buildings, discount stores, and people who didn't look anything like his usual crowd. The community center occupied an old brick building with peeling paint. A faded sign announced, Bronx Community Center. Everyone welcome. Not everyone, Michael muttered, pushing through the heavy doors. The reception area smelled of industrial cleaner. A middle-aged black woman looked up from behind a desk cluttered with papers and coffee cups. Can I help you? Michael straightened his shoulders. I'm Michael Edwards. I'm supposed to start community service today. Ah. She studied him. Judge Thompson's case. I'm Ms. Washington, center coordinator. She didn't offer to shake hands. Your paperwork came through yesterday. Great. So where do I sign in, and who do I talk to about scheduling around my other commitments? Ms. Washington's expression didn't change. This isn't a country club, Mr. Edwards. You'll be here when we need you, not when it's convenient. Do you know who my father is? A man facing federal charges, if I remember correctly. She stood up, revealing an imposing height. Let me be clear. Your name means nothing here. Your money means nothing here. You're here to serve this community, not the other way around. Michael felt his face flush. I didn't dash save it. She grabbed a clipboard. Follow me? They walked down a hallway lined with artwork, clearly done by children. Nothing like the valuable pieces in his family's collection. The sound of voices grew louder. Ms. Washington pushed open a door, revealing a large room filled with tables. Kids of various ages hunched over books and papers. A few volunteers moved between them, helping with homework. This is our after-school program, Ms. Washington explained. Many of these children come from families who can't afford private tutors or fancy learning programs. Michael caught the edge in her voice. What am I supposed to do? Help them learn? She handed him the clipboard. These are your assignments for today. Start with Table 3. They're struggling with algebra. Michael looked at Table 3. 3 black kids and 2 Hispanic ones, probably around 12 or 13, staring at math worksheets with frustrated expressions. I'm not a teacher, he protested. You attend Wellington Prep, correct? One of the most expensive private schools in Manhattan. She smiled without warmth. Time to put that elite education to use. She walked away before he could respond. Michael approached Table 3 slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. Oh, hi. His voice came out higher than intended. I'm Michael. I'm supposed to help with algebra? One of the kids looked up. You talk funny. Marcus, a girl hissed. Be nice. What? He does? Marcus squinted at Michael. You're that rich kid from the news, right? The one who went off on Judge Thompson. Michael's chest tightened. Let's focus on the math. My mom says your dad stole millions. Another boy chimed in. That true? Are we doing algebra or not? Michael snapped. The kids exchanged looks. The girl, her worksheet said Maria, spoke up. We're stuck on equations. None of this makes sense. Michael dropped into an empty chair, grateful for the change of subject. Show me what you're working on. The next hour passed in a blur of basic algebra. Despite himself, Michael found it wasn't terrible. The kids were actually trying, and explaining the concepts helped him forget where he was. Then lunch break came. Cafeteria's down the hall, Ms. Washington announced. For volunteers, too. Michael checked his wallet. I'll probably grab something else. Cafeteria, she repeated firmly. Part of the experience. The cafeteria looked nothing like Wellington Prep's gourmet dining hall. Metal tables, plastic chairs, and a line of kids getting what looked like mass-produced meals. Michael got in line, trying not to touch anything. The lunch lady plopped something supposedly chicken onto his tray, along with mixed vegetables that had definitely come from a can. He found an empty table and sat alone, poking at the food with his plastic fork. The noise level rose as more kids filled the room. Mind if I sit? Michael looked up. A volunteer about his age, black, wearing a Yankees cap, stood holding a tray. Free country, Michael muttered. Barely. The guy sat down. I'm Deshawn. You're the new volunteer, right? Not by choice. Yeah, I heard about the court thing. Deshawn took a bite of his lunch. Must be rough having to hang with the common folk. Michael pushed his tray away. Look, I didn't ask for this. Neither did those kids. Deshawn's tone sharpened. But here we all are. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What's that supposed to mean? It means you can either learn something from this experience, or you can stay stuck in your bubble until your hours are done. Deshawn stood up. Your choice, rich boy. Michael watched him walk away, appetite completely gone. He pulled out his phone, thinking to call his mother, then remembered. Their regular numbers had been disconnected after the asset freeze. The new burner phone only had emergency contacts. The afternoon group was younger kids, working on basic reading. Michael sat with a 6-year-old named Tommy, helping him sound out words in a battered copy of Green Eggs and Ham. You're doing it wrong, a voice said. Michael looked up to see Ms. Washington watching. What? You're not engaging. Reading isn't just about the words. It's about the story, the excitement. She sat down next to Tommy. Watch. She took the book, her voice changing as she read, bringing the silly story to life. Tommy's eyes lit up, and he started reading along with her. See? She handed the book back to Michael. These kids need more than just technical help. They need someone who cares. I'm only here because I know why you're here. She stood up. But that doesn't mean you can't make it matter. The rest of the afternoon dragged. By the time Ms. Washington called an end to the day, Michael's head was pounding. Sign your timesheet, she said, holding out a form. 4 hours today. Only 496 to go. Michael scribbled his signature. Whatever. See you tomorrow, Mr. Edwards. Her voice stopped him at the door. And Michael? Leave a designer coat at home. This is a place of work, not a fashion show. The subway ride home felt even longer. Michael stared at his reflection in the dark window, seeing himself through new eyes. His expensive clothes, his carefully styled hair. Everything that usually made him feel superior now made him stand out in the worst way. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. How was it? Michael started to type, horrible, then stopped. What would he say? That he'd spent the day helping poor kids learn? That he'd eaten lunch in a cafeteria that would make their chef quit in protest? That for the first time in his life, his family name and money meant nothing? He put the phone away without responding. The penthouse felt different when he finally got home. The marble floors, the priceless art, the perfect view of Central Park. It all seemed unreal, like a movie set pretending to be a home. Michael? His mother called from somewhere. Dinner's ready. Not hungry. He headed straight for his room. Lying on his bed, Michael stared at the ceiling. 4 hours down. 496 to go. The thought made him want to scream, but underneath the anger and resentment, something else nagged at him. The way Tommy's face lit up during story time. Maria's proud smile when she solved an equation. Even Deshawn's challenge about learning something. Michael rolled over, punching his pillow. He didn't want to think about any of it. Didn't want to question the walls he'd built around himself. Didn't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, Judge Thompson knew exactly what he was doing with this punishment. Tomorrow would be another day in his personal hell. But as Michael drifted off to sleep, one thought kept circling. Those kids hadn't seemed anything like what he'd expected. And that was the most unsettling realization of all. Michael's phone buzzed during his morning subway ride. Another notification from Instagram. He opened it, then immediately wished he hadn't. The video had over 1 million views. Him in the courtroom, face red with rage, screaming at Judge Thompson. The comments were brutal. Spoiled racist brat gets what he deserves. This is what privilege looks like. Hope he enjoys the Bronx. Face with tears of joy. A new comment popped up from at Wellington Prep. Can't believe this loser used to sit next to me in class. Michael recognized the username. Jeremy Chun, the same guy he'd paid for test answers. He scrolled through more comments, his stomach churning. His former classmates were all piling on, distancing themselves from his downfall. The subway screeched to a stop. Another day at the community center. At least there, nobody pretended to be his friend in the first place. Ms. Washington looked up as he entered. No designer coat today. Good choice. Michael had worn jeans and a plain sweater. Still expensive, but less obvious. Can we just get started? Different assignment today. She handed him a paper. Computer lab. Some of our kids need help with basic programming. Programming? Michael followed her down the hall. I thought this was just homework help. We try to teach practical skills too. Not everyone has coding camps and private tutors. The computer lab was small, just 10 ancient-looking desktops. A group of teenagers huddled around them, trying to follow basic HTML tutorials. This is Michael, Ms. Washington announced. He'll be helping today. A girl in the back snorted. That racist kid from the video? Michael's face burned. I'm not Jasmine, Ms. Washington warned. Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. Whatever. Jasmine turned back to her screen. I don't need his help anyway. But another student raised his hand. I'm stuck on this part about CSS. Michael walked over, grateful for the distraction. The kid, Carlos, according to his name tag, pointed at his screen. I can't get the colors to work right. Let me see. Michael leaned in, scanning the code. You're missing a semicolon here. And hex colors need the pound sign. Carlos fixed the errors. The page updated, now showing proper formatting. Hey, it worked. Thanks, man. Sure. Michael straightened up. Just basic stuff. Basic for you, maybe? Carlos grinned. Must be nice, having all those fancy computers at your school. Before Michael could respond, a commotion erupted at another station. This is stupid. A boy slammed his keyboard. Nothing works. Marcus? Michael recognized him from the math tutoring. What's wrong? Everything. Marcus gestured at his screen. Why do we even need to learn this? Not like any of us are getting tech jobs anyway. The room went quiet. Michael felt everyone watching, waiting for his response. Why not? The words came out before he could stop them. Why not? Marcus laughed bitterly. Look around, rich boy. You see any big tech companies rushing to hire kids from the Bronx? That's not not what? Fair. Marcus stood up. Like you care about fair. I saw that video. We all did. You think we're nothing but Marcus. Ms. Washington's voice cracked like a whip. Take a walk. Cool off. Marcus stormed out. Michael stared at the empty chair, his chest tight. Keep working, everyone, Ms. Washington said. Michael, a word? In the hallway, she studied him. That could have gone better. I didn't do anything. Exactly. She crossed her arms. You had a chance to connect, to show them you're more than that courtroom video. Instead, you froze. What am I supposed to say? They hate me. They hate what you represent. She softened slightly. But you can change that, if you're willing to try. Back in the lab, Michael noticed Jasmine struggling with her code. He approached cautiously. Want help? From you? She didn't look up. Pass. Look, I know you saw the video, Dash. My little brother saw it too. Now she did look up, eyes blazing. He asked me why the rich white boy was so angry at the nice judge. How do I explain that to a 6-year-old? Michael's throat tightened. I don't know, right? You don't know anything about us. She turned back to her screen. Must be nice. The rest of the morning passed in uncomfortable silence. During lunch, Michael sat alone again, checking his phone. More notifications. More former friends publicly denouncing him. At Wellington Prep, remember when Edwards paid for test answers? Total fraud like his dad, rolling on the floor laughing at Manhattan Elite. Can't believe we ever hung out with this racist loser at prep school, Princess. He's getting exactly what he deserves. Suddenly, the phone disappeared from his hands. Deshawn stood there, holding it. Hey! Michael stood up. Give that back. Make me? Deshawn's voice was calm. Come on, rich boy. Show everyone who you really are. Michael's fists clenched. The cafeteria went quiet, watching. He saw Ms. Washington in the doorway, waiting. Slowly, he sat back down. Please give me my phone. Deshawn placed it on the table. Your old friends turning on you? They were never really friends. No kidding. Deshawn sat down. Real friends call you out when you're wrong. They don't enable your worst behavior for social points. Michael stared at his untouched lunch. Why are you even talking to me? Because someone has to. Deshawn leaned forward. Look, what you said in that courtroom. That was messed up. But hiding in your shame isn't going to fix anything. I'm not hiding, Dash, really? Then why haven't you apologized to Marcus? Or try to actually understand why Jasmine's brother was so upset? They don't want to hear it. Maybe not. Deshawn stood up. But you still need to say it. After lunch, Michael found Marcus in the computer lab, still struggling with his code. The syntax is case-sensitive, Michael said quietly. That's why it's not working. Marcus ignored him. I'm sorry. The words felt strange in Michael's mouth. What I said in court, it was wrong. I was wrong. You think that fixes everything? No. Michael pulled up a chair. But maybe this will help. He pointed at the screen. Let me show you how to debug this. Then you can prove everyone wrong about tech jobs in the Bronx. Marcus hesitated, then nodded slightly. Fine. Show me. They worked through the code together. By the end of the session, Marcus had a working web page. Not bad, Michael admitted. You picked that up pretty fast. Yeah, well, Marcus saved his work. Maybe we're not all as stupid as you thought. In the hallway, Ms. Washington handed Michael his timesheet. Better today. Still a long way to go. I know. He signed the form. See you tomorrow? She almost smiled. We'll be here. The subway ride home felt different. Michael didn't check his phone or count the stops. Instead, he thought about Marcus's code, Jasmine's brother, Deshawn's words about real friends. His mother was waiting when he got home. How was it? Complicated. Michael headed for his room, then stopped. Mom? Did you know Wellington Prep has a mentoring program? I think so. Why? Just wondering if they ever work with kids from other neighborhoods. Kids who might not have the same opportunities. She stared at him for a long moment. I can look into it. Thanks. He closed his door, sat on his bed, and finally looked at his phone again. The comments were still there, still brutal. But somehow, they didn't sting as much. Maybe because for the first time, he was starting to see himself the way others saw him. And he didn't like what he saw at all. The video played on every screen in the computer lab. Someone had edited Michael's courtroom outburst into a viral remix, set to dramatic music. His face contorted with rage as he shouted at Judge Thompson, each racist word highlighted in bold text. Turn it off, Ms. Washington commanded. But it was too late. The damage was done. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, his breathing shallow. The morning class stared at him, Some angry, others just disappointed. Jasmine quickly closed her laptop, but he'd seen it clear enough. I think, he managed, I need some air. He bolted for the bathroom, barely making it before his breakfast tried to come up. The fluorescent lights hummed as he splashed cold water on his face. In the streaked mirror, his reflection looked pale, haunted. A knock on the door. Michael. Ms. Washington's voice. We need to talk. He found her in her small office, surrounded by filing cabinets and motivational posters. A fresh cup of coffee sat on her cluttered desk. Sit. She gestured to a worn chair. The video went viral last night. Over 2 million views. Great. Michael slumped down. More people to hate me. Is that what concerns you? People hating you? She leaned forward. Not the fact that you revealed such ugly prejudices in a public courtroom. I was angry. My father, was being held accountable for his crimes. Her voice hardened. Just like you're being held accountable for yours. I didn't commit any crimes. No. Tell that to every child in this center who now has to wonder if that's how all privileged white people see them. Tell that to Judge Thompson, who spent 30 years fighting prejudice to uphold justice. Michael stared at his hands. I can't change what I said. No, you can't. She opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. But you can change what you do next. The folder contained printouts, news articles about the center's struggling finances, grant applications, budget sheets showing red ink. We're in trouble, Ms. Washington explained. Funding cuts, rising costs. We might have to reduce programs. Why are you showing me this? Because you have a choice. She tapped the papers. You can keep wallowing in shame over that video, or you can help us save this place. How? I don't have money anymore. My father's accounts are frozen. We don't want your money. She smiled slightly. We want your skills. That coding class you've been helping with? It's the first step toward a tech training program we're trying to build. These kids could have real opportunities if we can keep the lights on. Michael picked up a grant application. I don't know anything about fundraising, but you know computers, marketing, social media. She raised an eyebrow. Unless that was all just privileged posturing? Before he could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. They found Marcus surrounded by other students, his face twisted with anger. You showed everyone. He shoved another boy. You made that remix. Hey. Michael stepped between them. Stop. Stay out of this. Marcus tried to push past him. This isn't your problem. Yes, it is. Michael's voice echoed in the hallway. It's my face in that video. My words. My mistake. The crowd went quiet. You want to be angry? Be angry at me. Michael faced the group. I'm the one who said those things. I'm the one who was wrong. But fighting each other won't fix anything. Marcus stepped back, breathing hard. Why do you even care? Because... Michael glanced at Ms. Washington. Because maybe I'm tired of being the person in that video. Later, in the computer lab, Michael pulled up a chair next to Carlos's workstation. How's the website coming? Carlos shrugged. Still can't get the layout right. Here? Michael opened a new document. Let me show you something about responsive design. It's what real developers use. They work through the code together. Other students drifted over, watching. Even Jasmine seemed interested. You actually know this stuff, she said, surprised. Yeah, well, Michael adjusted a CSS parameter. When you have every advantage, you better learn something useful. Must be nice. Marcus had joined the group. Having all those opportunities, Michael stopped typing. That's just it, though. I never saw them as opportunities. Just things I was entitled to. And now, Michael looked around the cramped lab, at the outdated computers and eager faces. Now I'm wondering why everyone doesn't get the same chances. Ms. Washington appeared in the doorway. Michael? A moment. In her office, she handed him a laptop, newer than the lab computers, but still no MacBook. It's not much, she said, but it'll help you work on the tech program proposal. You're serious about this? Dead serious. She sat down. We need a detailed plan, curriculum, equipment needs, instructor requirements. Think you can handle it? Michael opened the laptop. What if I mess it up? Then you'll learn from it. She smiled. Like you're learning from everything else? That evening, Michael missed his usual train home. He sat in the empty computer lab, researching similar programs, making notes. The center's ancient printer groaned as he printed draft after draft. His phone buzzed. Another Wellington Prep group chat notification. He started to ignore it, then paused. Opening the chat, he typed, "Looking for volunteer coding instructors. Anyone interested in making a real difference?" The responses came quickly. "LOL, what's wrong, Edwards? Slumming it? Did community service break your brain? Nobody wants to help your charity case." Then, unexpectedly at Jeremy Chin. "What kind of coding?" Michael sat up straighter. The same Jeremy he'd paid for test answers. The same one who'd mocked him online. Web development, basic programming. Kids eager to learn. A long pause. Then at Jeremy Chin, "My dad runs a tech training company. Might be interested. DM me details." Michael stared at the screen. A door opening where he least expected it. Ms. Washington found him still working as she locked up. "You should head home," she said. "It's late." "Almost done." Michael saved his files. "Just need to finish this section on equipment costs." She studied him. "You're really serious about this?" "Maybe." He closed the laptop. "Maybe it's time I used my privilege for something good." On the late train home, Michael didn't see his reflection in the window. Instead, he saw possibilities, a tech lab full of working computers, kids learning skills that could change their lives, a way to turn his shame into something meaningful. His phone buzzed again. More comments on the viral video. But this time he didn't look. The person in that video was becoming a stranger. Someone he used to be, but wasn't anymore. Or at least, someone he was trying very hard not to be. Michael stared at the spreadsheet on his borrowed laptop. Equipment costs, instructor fees, software licenses. The numbers kept climbing. The community center needed at least $50,000 to launch a proper tech program. "Those are some big numbers," Deshaun said, peering over his shoulder. "Yeah." Michael rubbed his eyes. "But I might have an idea." He pulled up his contact list. Before his father's arrest, these names had mint party invites and social climbing. Now they looked different, like resources waiting to be tapped. His phone rang. "Jeremy Chun. My dad wants to meet," Jeremy said without preamble. "Tomorrow morning." Michael checked his community service schedule. "I can't. I have Dash. He's making time before his morning meetings. 7 a.m. his office in Midtown." Jeremy paused. "Don't mess this up, Edwards." The next morning, Michael stood in the lobby of Chin Technologies, wearing his one remaining suit. The receptionist eyed him suspiciously. "Mr. Chin will see you now." James Chin's office screamed power, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art, a desk bigger than Michael's bedroom. Jeremy sat in a corner, expression unreadable. "Sit." Chin gestured to a chair. "Jeremy tells me you're looking for tech training support." "Yes, sir." Michael opened his laptop. "The Bronx Community Center serves hundreds of kids who dash." "I know the center." Chin cut him off. "I grew up 6 blocks from there." Michael's carefully prepared pitch died in his throat. "You what?" "My parents ran a convenience store. I did my homework at that center." Chun leaned forward. "Now, tell me why I should help the kid who tried to buy my son's test answers." Heat rushed to Michael's face. He glanced at Jeremy, who studied the floor. "I can't defend what I did," Michael said slowly. "To Jeremy, to Judge Thompson, to anyone. I was—" He swallowed hard. "I was exactly what everyone thinks I am. A spoiled, racist rich kid who never earned anything. And now I see what real privilege is." Michael turned his laptop around. "It's having opportunities others don't. These kids are brilliant, Mr. Chun. They just need a chance." Chun studied the proposal. $50,000 is a lot of money. "I have other meetings lined up. Tech companies, private donors dash no." Chun closed the laptop. "You'll need more than that." Michael's heart sank. "Sir, I dash, a proper training program needs at least twice that amount." Chun pulled out his checkbook. "I'll match whatever else you raise. Up to 100,000. Michael stared at him. "Really?" "On 2 conditions." Chin's pen hovered over the check. "First, Jeremy volunteers as an instructor. He needs to learn the same lesson you are." Jeremy's head snapped up. "Dad." "Second," Chin continued, "you personally oversee the program. Not just until your community service ends. For at least a year." "Done?" Michael didn't hesitate. Chin wrote the check. "Don't make me regret this." Outside the building, Jeremy caught up to Michael. "Hey." Jeremy shifted uncomfortably. "About those posts online." "Forget it." "No, listen. Jeremy took a deep breath. I was a coward, piling on when you were down. That's not. That's not who I want to be. Michael thought about Ms. Washington's words about real change. 7 a.m. Saturday. First instructor training session. I'll be there. Back at the center, Michael found Ms. Washington in her office. Chun Technologies is in. He showed her the pledge. If we can raise matching funds? She studied the paper. How did you convince them? I didn't. Michael sat down. Turns out Mr. Chun grew up around here. He remembers this place? Ah. She smiled. Not everyone forgets their roots. Ms. Washington? Michael hesitated. Did you know, when Judge Thompson sent me here, that this place would change you? She shook her head. We never know what will open someone's eyes. We just provide the opportunity. A commotion from the computer lab interrupted them. They found Marcus showing a group of younger kids how to create a simple game. See? He pointed at the screen. When you change this variable, the whole thing changes. The kids watched in awe as colors shifted and shapes moved. Not bad, Michael said from the doorway. Want to help teach the new programming class? Marcus turned. What new class? Michael explained the funding, the expanded program, the real opportunities it could provide. For real? Marcus's eyes lit up. Like actual tech training? Actual everything? Michael pulled up a chair. But we need student leaders. People who know this community, who can show others what's possible. I'm in. Marcus grinned. But you better not be playing, rich boy. Not playing. Michael opened his laptop. Now, about that game code. They spent the afternoon debugging and improving Marcus's project. Other students drifted in, asking questions, offering suggestions. Even Jasmine contributed some ideas for the graphics. Later, as Michael packed up to leave, Deshaun appeared. Heard about Chun Technologies. He leaned against a desk. Pretty impressive. Just the start. Michael saved his files. Still need to raise matching funds. Yeah, about that. Deshaun handed him a thumb drive. Some of us put together a video. Might help with fundraising. Michael plugged it in. The video opened with shots of the center. Kids working at computers. Focused faces lit by screens. Then it cut to interviews, students talking about their dreams, their barriers, their determination. This is... Michael's throat tightened. This is really good. Started learning video editing here last year. Deshaun shrugged. Figured it was time to give back. The final shot showed Michael helping a young girl with coding, both of them smiling at a successful outcome. Nothing like the viral courtroom video. Why? Michael turned to Deshaun. After everything I said, everything I did, because change is possible. Deshaun headed for the door. You're proving that every day. That night, Michael sat in his room, sending emails to every contact he had. Former classmates, family friends, his father's old business associates. The message was simple. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm asking you to help me do better. These kids deserve a chance. Will you help give them one? Responses trickled in. Some dismissive, some curious, some surprisingly supportive. A few promised to attend the fundraising presentation he was planning. His mother knocked on his door. It's late, Michael. Almost done. He sent another email. Just need to finish the presentation slides. She sat on his bed. I barely recognize you anymore. Good. Michael kept typing. I barely recognize myself. Your father called from prison today. She twisted her wedding ring. He asked about you. Michael's fingers stilled on the keyboard. What did you tell him? That his son is becoming a better man than he ever was. Michael thought about Judge Thompson, about Mr. Chin's check, about Marcus teaching kids to code, about second chances and what you do with them. Mom? He turned to face her. I need to ask Judge Thompson something. The courthouse looked different now. Michael stood at the base of the steps, his presentation materials clutched in one hand. Deshaun's video queued up on his laptop. You sure about this? Ms. Washington stood beside him. We could find another way. No. Michael took a deep breath. It has to be him. Judge Thompson's clerk had been surprised by the meeting request. Even more surprised when Michael explained why. But the appointment was set. 10 minutes to make his case. Security felt different too. No special treatment, no cutting lines. Just another visitor being scanned and checked. The clerk led them to Thompson's chambers. The judge sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing documents. Mr. Edwards, Thompson looked up. Ms. Washington, please sit. Michael's hands shook slightly as he set up his laptop. Thank you for seeing us, Your Honor. 500 hours of community service was your sentence. Thompson removed his glasses. I understand you're now volunteering additional time? Yes, sir. Michael pulled up the presentation. That's actually why we're here. He started with Deshawn's video. Thompson watched in silence as students shared their stories, their dreams, their determination to learn despite limited resources. The center needs funding, Michael explained when the video ended. We have a matching pledge from Chin Technologies, but we need to raise $50,000 first. And you're here because your endorsement would mean something. Michael met Thompson's gaze. Not just for fundraising, for showing people that change is possible. Thompson leaned back. The last time you were in this building, you showed significant prejudice against people who look like me. I know. Michael's voice cracked. I was wrong. So wrong. But these kids, they taught me more in a few weeks than I learned in years at Wellington Prep. Such as, that privilege isn't just about money. Michael gestured to the pause video. It's about opportunities, access, the things I took for granted that these kids have to fight for. Thompson picked up a paper from his desk. I've reviewed your proposal. A tech training program? Yes, sir. Real skills, real opportunities. Mr. Chun grew up near the center. He said, I know James Chun. Thompson's expression softened slightly. We served on the Bar Association's diversity committee together. Ms. Washington spoke up. Michael has been instrumental in developing this program, Your Honor. His dedication goes far beyond his required hours. I see. Thompson studied Michael. And what happens when your sentence is complete? I've committed to running the program for at least a year. Michael sat straighter. These kids trusted me with their dreams. I won't let them down. Thompson was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Washington, would you give us a minute? She squeezed Michael's shoulder as she left. The door closed with a soft click. Tell me, Mr. Edwards. Thompson folded his hands. What changed? Everything. Michael swallowed hard. The first day at the center, this kid Marcus called me out about tech jobs in the Bronx. I started to give some privileged answer, but then I saw myself through his eyes. Through everyone's eyes. And what did you see? A racist. A bully. Someone who thought money made him better than everyone else. Michael's voice shook. Someone who looked at you and saw only what his prejudices told him to see. And now I see what you saw. A spoiled kid who needed to learn about the real world. Michael met Thompson's gaze. You could have sent me anywhere for community service, but you sent me exactly where I needed to go. Thompson stood, walking to his window. When I sentenced you, many thought I was too lenient. I know. I read the comments. But I believed throughout my career that education is more powerful than punishment. Thompson turned back. Show me your fundraising plan. They spent the next hour going through the details. Thompson asked pointed questions, suggested improvements, offered connections to potential donors. I'll speak at your fundraising event, he said finally. Not to endorse you personally, but to support the center's mission. Thank you, Your Honor. Michael gathered his materials. I won't let you down. One more thing. Thompson held up a finger. I want quarterly reports on the program's progress. Detailed ones. Yes, sir. Outside, Ms. Washington waited. Well, Michael showed her Thompson's notes. He's in, and he has ideas for other funding sources. Back at the center, they found chaos in the computer lab. The ancient air conditioning had failed, and computers were overheating. Perfect timing. Marcus unplugged another smoking machine. We're dying in here. Michael checked the temperature. Everyone out. We'll use the main room today. They relocated to folding tables, Michael and Jeremy taking turns projecting code on a white wall. Despite the heat, the kids stayed focused. Check this out. Carlos showed his project, a simple website about community resources. Think we could make it real? Like, for the whole neighborhood? Michael looked at the rough design. Why not? Let's make it our first-class project. After session, Jeremy lingered. My dad wants progress reports. Join me for the donor meetings next week. Michael saved the day's lesson plans. Show him we're serious? Yeah, okay. Jeremy packed up. Hey, about the Wellington chat. I told them to back off. Posted about what we're doing here. Thanks. Michael meant it. See you Saturday? Later, reviewing budget numbers with Ms. Washington, Michael's phone buzzed. A text from his father. Your mother tells me you're still at that center. Why? Michael stared at the message. How could he explain what this place meant now? The lives he was touching, the person he was becoming? He typed back, because I finally found something worth working for. The response came quickly. You're in Edwards. You're meant for bigger things. No, Dad. I'm meant for better things. He put the phone away, turning back to Ms. Washington. The AC company can come tomorrow. Chin Technologies is covering it. Good. She smiled. You know, when Judge Thompson first called about placing you here, you didn't want me. I thought you'd be more trouble than help. She shook her head. Glad I was wrong. Ms. Washington? Michael hesitated. After my hours are done, if I wanted to expand the program to other centers, one step at a time, but she was smiling. Let's get this one running first. That night, Michael added another page to his presentation. Photos of the kids working, quotes about their dreams, real stories about real potential. His mother found him still working at midnight. Everything okay? Yeah. He showed her the presentation. Just want it to be perfect. These kids deserve that. She studied the photos. I don't see the angry boy from that courtroom anymore. He's gone. Michael saved his work. Or at least he's trying to be. Good. She kissed his forehead. Because I like this version much better. Michael lay awake later, thinking about Thompson's words about education versus punishment, about second chances and what you do with them. Tomorrow would bring more donor meetings, more planning sessions, more steps toward making dreams real. But for the first time in his life, Michael wasn't counting the hours until something ended. He was counting the hours until something began. The community center's main room had never looked so different. Gone were the folding tables and worn chairs, replaced by rows of new computers, each workstation complete with dual monitors and professional-grade equipment. A large screen dominated the front wall, displaying the center's new logo, Bronx Tech Initiative, building tomorrow's leaders. Michael adjusted his tie, watching people file in for the showcase event. Tech executives in expensive suits mixed with community members in work clothes. His mother sat in the front row, next to Mr. Chun. And there, slipping in quietly through the side door, Judge Thompson. Ready? Deshawn appeared beside him, camera in hand. Think so? Michael checked his notes one last time. The kids? Nervous but excited. Deshawn grinned. Like someone else I used to know? Ms. Washington took the podium first. Welcome to the Bronx Community Center's first tech program showcase. 3 months ago, this was just an idea. Today, she gestured to the rows of students, each ready to present their projects. Michael spotted Marcus adjusting his borrowed tie, Carlos practicing under his breath, Jasmine straightening her presentation boards. None of this would have been possible, Ms. Washington continued, without the vision and dedication of someone who started as a reluctant volunteer and became one of our strongest advocates. Michael Edwards? The room applauded politely as Michael took the stage. 3 months ago, the sound would have fed his ego. Now it just reminded him how much was at stake. When Judge Thompson sentenced me to community service, Michael began, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. It was the best. He saw Thompson lean forward slightly. I came here thinking I knew everything, that my privilege made me better. Instead, I found people who taught me what real strength looks like. Michael gestured to the students. These kids face barriers I never imagined, but they don't let that stop them. They dream bigger, work harder, and support each other in ways I never learned at my private school. The room had gone completely quiet. Thanks to generous donors and countless volunteer hours, we've created something special here. But don't take my word for it. Let our students show you. One by one, the kids presented their projects. Marcus demonstrated his neighborhood resource website, now a fully functional platform serving the community. Carlos showed a mobile app he developed for local small businesses. Jasmine unveiled a coding tutorial system designed specifically for younger students. Between presentations, Michael watched the executives' faces. He saw surprise, then interest, then genuine enthusiasm. Mr. Chin nodded approvingly as Marcus handled complex technical questions with ease. And this is just the beginning, Michael explained during the closing remarks. With continued support, We plan to expand the program to other centers, reaching more students, creating more opportunities. He paused, looking directly at Judge Thompson. Someone wise once showed me that education is more powerful than punishment. That change is possible if we're willing to learn. These students taught me that lesson every day. Now they're ready to teach others. After the formal presentations, the room buzzed with energy. Executives exchanged cards with students. Parents beamed with pride. Ms. Washington worked the crowd, securing more pledges of support. Impressive work. Judge Thompson appeared beside Michael. Quite different from our last meeting in my chambers. Yes, Your Honor. Michael gestured to the bustling room. Everything's different now. Indeed. Thompson watched Marcus explaining his code to a tech recruiter. Your quarterly reports showed progress, but seeing it in person, I had good teachers. Michael nodded toward Ms. Washington. And the students had a good advocate. Thompson adjusted his glasses. I understand you've committed to running this program even after your service hours end? Yes, sir. Actually, Michael hesitated. I'm not going back to Wellington Prep. I'm finishing high school here in the Bronx. Thompson's eyebrows rose. Your mother agreed to this? It was her idea. Michael smiled slightly. She's changed too. Across the room, Deshawn was filming interviews with students and parents. Carlos's mother wiped tears as her son described his plans for college. Jasmine high-fived a younger girl who'd mastered basic HTML. Michael, Marcus called out. Come here a second. He excused himself from Judge Thompson, joining Marcus at his workstation. A representative from a major tech company was reviewing his code. This is impressive work, the woman said. We have a paid internship program for high school students. Would you be interested? Marcus's eyes widened. For real? Very real. She handed him a business card. Have your program director send me your application. As she walked away, Marcus stared at the card. Did that just happen? That just happened. Michael grinned. Better update your resume. Man, Marcus shook his head. When you first showed up here, all angry and stuck up. I never thought. Yeah. Michael watched more students talking with potential employers. Me neither. Later, as people began to leave, Ms. Washington gathered the students for a group photo. Michael started to step back, but she waved him in. You're part of this too, she insisted. Whether you like it or not. The camera flashed. In that moment, Michael didn't see race or class or privilege. He just saw people who taught him more about life than all his years in private school. His phone buzzed, a text from his father. Saw the video from the showcase. Maybe I was wrong about a few things too. Before Michael could respond, another message arrived. Proud of you, son. He pocketed the phone, helping students clean up their workstations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that change wasn't just possible. It was necessary. Hey, Deshawn showed him something on his camera. Check this out. It was a split screen, Michael's courtroom outburst on one side, today's presentation on the other. The contrast was startling. Quite a journey, Deshawn said quietly. Think people will believe it? Michael watched his past and present selves. That someone can really change that much? They better. Deshawn turned off the camera. Because if you can change, anyone can. As the last people left, Michael stood in the doorway of the computer lab. The new equipment hummed softly, screens glowing in the dim light. On one monitor, Marcus's website was still open, its homepage declaring, "Welcome to our community." Ms. Washington joined him. Thinking deep thoughts? Just wondering what would have happened if Judge Thompson had sent me anywhere else. He didn't. She squeezed his shoulder. Some people get second chances. Few make the most of them. Michael thought about the long journey from that courtroom to this moment. The anger and prejudice that had blinded him. The kids who'd shown him a better way. My community service hours are officially done, he said. I know. She smiled. But something tells me we'll still see you tomorrow. Count on it. Michael took one last look at the lab, at the dreams taking shape in lines of code. We got work to do. Outside, the Bronx streets buzzed with life. Michael didn't call a car or check the time of his train. He just started walking, part of the community he'd once looked down on, now proud to call it home. Behind him, the center's lights glowed like a beacon. Ahead, the future waited. Not the one his father had planned, but the one he'd chosen for himself. One line of code, one student, one change at a time.